Good afternoon, and thank you for all coming along. This is actually a lot bigger stage than I anticipated, which I suppose should be fair game for someone who's made a living coaxing people to open up in front of the camera. Some kind of karma at play there, perhaps. But let me jump straight in to this with a quick what, where, a who, and a why. I'm here to talk to you all and hopefully further the discussion about effective use of video in online teaching and learning. I'm going to frame this discussion partly using examples drawn from University of Melbourne's massive open online courses, their MOOCs, but I'm really actually interested in and involved in the production and use of video in the wider educational context. And specifically, I'm going to talk to you about the transition in thinking from what I've called teaching on video to teaching through video. Now, the specific phrasing I've plucked from Zach Wolfett's white paper, 2015 white paper on effective use of video. That's available online, and I'll provide you a link to a full Zotero bibliography at the end of the presentation if you want to follow up any of the research that I reference. But what I'm not going to talk about, I'm not going to discuss learning designs, although I'm going to talk about learning design principles. This is because I'm not a learning designer, but rather a video producer. And because my learning design colleague here, Mr. Peter Mello, who I work very closely with, has already given a great presentation covering that this morning. So hopefully some of you made it along to that presentation. So for the purposes of this talk, we're going to assume that any videos we talk about are occurring within the context of a strong, well-aligned learning design. I'm also not going to present any new empirical research, though I've been working with colleagues in the Melbourne Centre for the Study of Higher Education, who are busily testing hypotheses using experimental techniques based on psychological methods. And those findings are going to be presented mid-year, and an orange paper, which is more orange than a white paper, will be published on their website, which I'll share at the end of the presentation. I'm also not going to talk about student-generated video content or video as assessment, which are both fantastic topics, but not in my scope as a producer just yet. So what I am going to talk about is really based on the projects I've worked on in the video and media team at Learning Environments in the University of Melbourne, the people I've worked with, the academics I've helped through the process, and I think as a producer it's the perfect point in the chain to add something to this discussion about what makes good educational video. So that's the what. Who am I? I am a video producer, and let me check. How many of you have met with a video producer in the course of your work or job in the last year? Oh, there's a few, yeah, maybe 30%. So I will explain a little because it can be a bit ambiguous. A video producer is a negotiator. They negotiate between a project's expectations and its realities, its budgets, and its timeframes, creative and practical concerns, quality and quantity. But producers are also creators. They create briefs, storyboards, budgets. They produce scripts or help draft key messages. They create the atmosphere of cooperation that allows a project to be realised. And they create the sense of urgency and discipline when a project is at risk of going off the rails, which of course never happens. And producers are also collaborators. They collaborate with academics, students, learning designers, educational technologists, budget setters, venue managers. And we even collaborate with the security guards when you've forgotten to contact the venue managers in advance. So finally, in the context of my job at University of Melbourne, producers also get redeployed as directors, camera operators, studio techs, and editors depending on the demands of the individual project. Which, based on conversations I've had with other small university-based teams, that's not unusual for our sector, or that might be unusual in other sectors. So it's a really busy job, and that's why my tongue is sort of hanging out dorkily in this picture. And you can even use your video producer to block out the sun at a pinch. We're very handy people to have around. So finally, why video and why now? Surely video is soon to be superseded by newer, more immersive ways of telling stories, of transporting you to other locations, being in the room with someone vast distances away. I would say yes, but video is still going to be one of the predominant modes of online delivery now and further into the future a few years. And there we go. Furthermore, in the broadest sense, I don't think we've really mastered, or I'm going to argue even scratched the surface of effective use of video as a teaching tool in tertiary education. Here's a quick anecdote. So a friend of mine recently enrolled in a very expensive master's course at a top Australian institution, which I won't name. One paper was delivered online. This is of 4 papers. And the weekly information transfer component consisted of automatically generated lecture capture videos of previously live lectures. So obviously on one particular day, the lecturer had generously given the students an early pass. The lecturer finished early, but the recording continued for another 30 minutes while the lecturer checked their emails, checked their Facebook. And look, reality is many students may only ever have been exposed to automated lecture capture videos in the course of their study. So basically, I've observed it's a really mixed bag out there. And when we do move to more immersive 3D augmented mediums, we're going to face some of the same questions and challenges that we encounter when we sit down to plan a video. So how is this medium good at communicating? Are we making the best use of this? How can we navigate all the different possibilities of the medium to match the learning outcomes we're trying to achieve and the resources that we've been allocated? Otherwise, we risk ending up watching someone just check their emails in 360 virtual reality. Okay, I'll leave that one alone, but it's a valuable discussion to have, and it's a good time to have it. So keeping that idea of video capture or lecture conversion in mind, let's talk a bit about teaching on video. So in 2013, we'd started designing and producing massive open online courses. And using some existing expertise within our department, we converted a small teleconference room into a studio with a single camera to capture lectures, green screens so that they could interact with static visual resources like maps and diagrams, and a teleprompter so they could opt to either read from a script or actually preview their online content, speak in a less rehearsed way. We also provided them with a digital tablet so they could annotate, sketch and mark up. So, now what do you think happens when you invite a lecturer with, say, 25 years experience, delivering 90-minute lectures to a room of 100 or 500 people, to stand in front of a green screen and talk? And bear in mind that this is what they're seeing, this is their perspective. Kind of daunting. And if you said a 90-minute video, you'd be wrong, but not far wrong. Actually, we limited them to 1-hour sessions, and most managed to talk for about 25 or 35 minutes before running out of steam. And actually, that's not fair either. The answer really is it depends. Depends on how well prepared they were, how good the advice they'd been given beforehand, and the direction they received in the studio. How explicit the role of the video lecture was in the context of the overall learning design and the agreed learning outcomes, and also on their own comfort levels. So there was a whole range of variables to deal with. So, to improve our chances of successfully creating a good online video lecture, we did have to bring ourselves back up to speed with what makes a good lecture in general. So I'm lucky in that my Pro-Vice Chancellor of Teaching and Learning, Gregor Kennedy, has co-authored a great paper on this topic called Reassessing the Value of University Lectures. And he summarises arguments for and against the lecture as an educational tool and concludes that if done well, lectures are still extremely valuable. He also summarises the research on what makes an effective lecture, pulling out pointers like content in segments of no more than 15 minutes, interspersed with a range of interactive activities, a mix of dialogue and monologue, well designed, well presented, and to favour reasoning or problem solving over factual knowledge transfer. And again, I'll share that bibliography via Zotero at the end and encourage you to check out his paper. So, after a bit of trial and error, we were actively incorporating this research and experience and knowledge back into our production processes, with more explicit expectations about video runtime, advice on presenting, on how to break up lectures with activities, incorporation of interviews and co-presenting models to kind of reduce the monologue and reintroduce dialogue. And we created some very successful MOOCs. some of which are still out there, most of which are still out there for you to check out. We garnered 1 million MOOC enrolments, which is amazing when you think about it, all from this little class. And we generated a lot of excitement and kind of expertise amongst the staff across our many faculties, many of whom who went on to champion the use of video back in their on-campus day-to-day work persona. And so this in turn has led to the commission of a new facility of 3 fantastic studios, 2 for video and 1 for VR. And here's our VC and PVC, officially launching them just a couple of weeks ago. But remember, so far, all the examples I've shown you were done in that trusty old converted classroom with our trusty bit of green or white or black cloth behind. And just 1 camera. Okay, in truth it was 2 cameras. The first one finally just melted down after thousands of hours of faithful service. So, are we teaching through video yet? I'd argue that we're not. We can do better, and we know this instinctively. We've seen what are essentially very well scripted, visually stunning video lectures delivered on TV by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson on Cosmos, who is something of a favourite amongst my workmates. So a bit like our melted camera, we were pretty keen to get out of the studio and just to see what we could do with this newfound enthusiasm building for the video lecture as a format. So we embarked on a pretty ambitious project, Sexing the Canvas. Now, educational theorists like Jack Coomey, who I really recommend you read, have tried to break down the distinctive ways in which video can assist learning. The learning affordances of video, he'd call it. And he points out that just some of the many features of video, the ability to juxtapose animations and images, illustrate with movement and scale, highlight interaction and shifting viewpoints, all to create narrative power. So in Sexing the Canvas, we put our lecturers in galleries in Australia and abroad, and really help them weave a narrative out of a sequence of paintings, intercut with very fine, detailed close-ups and juxtapositions of paintings and photographs. And I'm very happy to report that despite a really recent turn towards career-focused business and IT MOOCs, that this one continues to grow and has gathered sort of an increasingly large and loyal cohort of students. I think just broke 10,000 just last week. It's very exciting. So, surely we're teaching on video now, teaching through video, not on video, through video. We've conquered the video lecture format and explored a few of those learning affordances of video. But what about dialogue versus monologue? I mean, so far we've barely scratched the surface of the potential of video to present dialogue and debate. So based on my viewing experience, and I do a lot of viewing, most universities have experimented and perhaps mastered the video interview with subject matter expert, big armchair stuff as a genre. But just take a moment to think about how many genres of interviews we're exposed to in the media in a given week. There's the vox pops, the panel session, the round table, the debate, the fireside chat, the eyewitness testimonial, that touchy-feely 60 Minutes one with the moody lighting and the pot plant in the background. Like I could go on just on interviews for a whole 20 minutes. Because each one has a different set of visual cues and meanings to be exploited or subverted. And we should be armed and waiting for the right pedagogical problem to present itself. And actually the team from University of South Australia with their transmedia presentation gave us good examples of where they're playing with exactly those ideas. Or what about the ability of video to demonstrate tacit knowledge, show us things that the eye might miss? Here's a few examples of more technical or physical demonstrations that we've produced. So I'd love to go on there. I'd love to go on and on. I haven't touched on dramatisations, for example. And actually, Coomey lists 24 specific affordances of video, each one able to be paired with an example and a learning outcome. But I'd need all day to go through them all, and I am running out of time slowly. So, surely we can say now we're teaching through video. We're using the many affordances of video to effectively communicate exactly what it is that the students need to understand to achieve their learning outcome that we've carefully set out in our learning design. Or using a more active frame, we've provided them context-rich, authentic examples and case studies that they can interrogate using their own newly acquired learning skills. Yeah, well, again, it's a yes, but surely the most exciting thing about video is that it allows us to mix and match, slice and dice, and most importantly, combine all these different approaches together to treat these styles or genres, the affordances, more like ingredients in a recipe. That's something that comes intuitively to someone who's worked in the media outside of education, but sometimes in education I really get the sense that it's still Weet-Bix with no milk. And if you've ever tried to eat a Weet-Bix with no milk, it's not easy. Okay, so what am I talking about now? So finally, a couple of quick illustrations. We've been working to give our students in the city-bound Melbourne CBD campus an insight into the kind of red soil farming that goes on in rural Victoria, where the university has an agricultural campus. It's not an easy task, short of a huge and logistically challenging field trip, but by combining interviews with the farmers, some filmed demonstrations, and some aerial footage, just the sequence of 3 shots, I think, you really need to see the video to appreciate it, but that sequence works in a way that would be hard to achieve through other methods. And I imagine it, even if you've never travelled further than the lush green Waikato, you can gain some insight into the challenges these farmers face just by reflecting on those 3 video frames. One last example. Our most recent MOOC is How Music Can Change Your Life, where we created short documentaries to show music therapy in action in 6 different contexts, capturing spontaneous music-making sessions and hearing in their own words what music means to a really diverse range of interviewees. So in this example, to hear the fantastic, joyful music welling out from this choir in an Indigenous meeting place in Melbourne, interwoven with interviews where participants recount what were, for me, really shocking, confrontational, revelatory tales of their life in quite recent Australia, I think it shows me video can still be really powerful and potent combination. Okay, so hopefully I've reinvigorated your interest in video as a teaching tool, and I realised, wow, I can't wait to get back to work next Monday. As promised, if you want to read the bibliography of research, here's a link to a public Zotero collection. There's also a link to our video showcase, which will be updated mid-year to include an intuitive, hopefully intuitive and interactive tool that will help you match your production techniques and your pedagogical aims based on that research that I mentioned that we're doing. There's a link to the Centre for the Study of Higher Education in Melbourne, where the orange paper, which I mentioned, will be published soon. And there's my email. You're welcome to get in touch, ask me any questions, whether you want to know how we set up our new studio, or why we were shearing a sheep or dissecting a squid in those little thumbnails, or if you even want to visit us in Melbourne and take a studio tour, anything really. And that's it. Thank you.
We have time for questions. No questions? Sorry, it's just hard to see. Oh, yep, there's one over there, John.
So far, we do work with actors when we're dramatising or reenacting a scenario. And this is quite common in the medical and health sciences especially, but more recently in veterinary sciences. And actually a lot of those practices which combine communication and science, we find that a well-done dramatic scenario can really help get across some of the finer points of communication which are hard to teach face-to-face or through readings. But as far as actually presenting the content goes, we haven't gone as far as bringing in actors. We've brought in actors to help work with our academics to mixed success, I'd have to say. So sometimes we've recommended scripting as a way to overcome those nerves, and you can't really beat a studio test or tryout or orientation session to kind of sort people into categories of ability. But then putting a script in front of someone who's been talking off the cuff for 20, 30, 40 years, sometimes they're emeritus professors, that doesn't always work either, so it's very much horses for courses. But I think as the teaching model changes in general, that it's possible to go looking within the department for someone who's got good presentation skills. We've had people start off as teaching assistants on the MOOC and then end up by the end of it being such a part of the process that they're presenting courses or presenting modules quite successfully. So I'd say cast the net a little bit wider and you might find there's some talent right under your nose. Hope that's helpful. Yeah.
That sounds very interesting approach, but have you done any kind of a study to compare video, on video, through video, the effectiveness?
So if we go to the bibliography, I've read about 30 different papers, all breaking down the effectiveness within their own disciplines often. And everyone seems to come to a slightly different conclusion. And I think the story there is it's impossible to derive like an overall statistic on video will improve your teaching this much. It's very much... Right. Yeah. We're doing it right now. So my colleague Jason Horvath in the Melbourne Graduate School for Education and Centre for Study of Higher Education, he's an educational psychologist, and so he's designing experiments just like you describe. What happens when we produce the same script with someone on screen and off screen, or two people, one of them off screen and one of them on screen asking questions? What happens if you take the same script and put a lot of production resources behind it, or not many production resources behind it? He calls that one the Attenborough effect, testing whether the kind of money in gives you deliverable improvements out. That research is all going to be written up and published. So I can't really jump ahead of Jason because he's following the scientific method. But yes, it's something we're very interested in. Yeah, very soon. Mid-year his deadline is. So. Good question. Thank you. Yes. So actually the Melbourne, it's CSHE URL is the one to follow there, and that's where the orange paper will appear.
Hi, James. Thanks for that. It was excellent. Are you providing transcripts or closed captions, subtitles for your vids?
At the moment, it's not, but it's project by project and it is platform by platform. So Coursera, where most of our online course content, our massive open online course content resides, all have captions, and they're all proofread by a very dedicated team because it's important to have those correct. And we've gone as far as some of our English language videos having Chinese captions and vice versa. We've produced a set of lectures in Mandarin with English subtitles, with Mandarin subtitles. Other projects, there's not, I don't think, a university-wide resource for captioning, so it's kind of an opt-in. When our client asks us to produce subtitles, we go off to a number of different cloud providers with varying results. If you want to talk specifics, I can tell you who we've had experience with, but I agree that it's very important, and I'm actually surprised that we're still talking about it in 2017.
Okay. I'll catch up with you at the dinner.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Actually, my eyes were really open to that. We produced a module, 90 videos for the Victoria Teacher of Deaf course. So this was modules on supporting hearing impaired students at high school. So it's been in front of my mind ever since that big project. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more further questions, I think the next skill for teachers is dust off their acting skills.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Jamie.
Thanks.